Good day, everyone. The topic that we will tackle today is about indigenous cultures and traditions. So before we start, I would like to inform you that this is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material. The learning objectives. Comprehending the perspective of indigenous cultures, cultural understanding and respect, historical context and contemporary relevance, understanding indigenous land rights, and lastly, evaluating the effects and consequences of resource extraction. The belief systems and spirituality. It encompasses a wide range of philosophies, religions, and personal beliefs that explore questions about the nature of existence, purpose of life, and the divine. They can provide individuals with meaning, guidance, and a sense of connection to something greater than themselves. So in the Philippines, it is a diverse country with a wide range of belief systems and spirituality influenced by indigenous traditions, colonial history, and contemporary practices. Here are some examples of belief systems and spiritual traditions in the Philippines. Roman Catholicism, Islam, Iglesia ni Cristo, and Buddhism. So what is Roman Catholicism? The Philippines is predominantly Catholic, with a strong influence from Spanish colonization. Many Filipinos practice Catholicism and observe religious rituals, including Holy Mass, processions, and novenas. Islam. In the southern Philippines, particularly in Mindanao, there is significant Muslim population. Islam is an essential aspect of the culture and spirituality of various Muslim ethnic groups like the Moro and Taosu. Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, a Christian denomination founded in the Philippines. Iglesia ni Cristo has a substantial following and emphasizes the unity and purity of the Church. And lastly, the Buddhism. In some urban areas, you can find Buddhist temples and communities. Buddhism is practiced by a minority of Filipinos, often those of Chinese descent. Rituals and ceremonies. It plays significant roles in various belief systems and spiritual practices. They serve numerous purposes, including worship, celebration, and rites of passage. Rituals and ceremonies are two words that are often confused when it comes to the understanding of their meaning and connotations. A ritual refers to a group of actions performed for their symbolic value. On the other hand, a ceremony is performed on a special occasion. So, what is the purpose of rituals and ceremonies? Um, Rituals connect, connect us deeply to ourselves and to the higher source that gives all life. It gives us the comfort of feeling we belong somewhere, of engaging with the community. So the Philippines is culturally diverse country with a rich tapestry of rituals and ceremonies influenced by a combination of indigenous traditions, religious practices, and historical events. So here are some notable rituals and ceremonies in the Philippines. Ati-Atihan Festival. It's celebrated in Kalibo, Aklan. This festival honors the Santo Niño or Child Jesus and features participants wearing traditional Visayan attire and smearing themselves with soot to mimic the indigenous Atay people. The Sinulog Festival, held in Cebu City. The Sinulog Festival pays tribute to the Santo Niño through street dancing, processions, and colorful costumes. Participants dance to the rhythm of drums, shouting "Viva Pit Señor!" The Pahiyas Festival. Lukban, Quezon hosts the Pahiyas Festival to give thanks for a bountiful harvest. Houses are adorned with colorful agricultural products, creating stunning display. And lastly, the Pista ng Item na Nazareno. Every January 9th, millions of devotees flock to Manila for the Fest of the Black Nazarene. They participate in a grand procession to honor the statue of the Black Nazarene. In conclusion, belief systems and spirituality, as well as the rituals and ceremonies associated with them, are profound expressions of human culture and identity. Across indigenous cultures and traditions worldwide, these practices are deeply intertwined with a sense of belonging, a connection to the natural world, and the reverence for ancestors. In an increasingly interconnected world, it is crucial to respect and honor these traditions, rec- recognizing the significance and the need for cultural preservation. Embracing and learning from indigenous belief systems and ceremonies can promote greater culture awareness, environmental stewardship, and a deeper appreciation for the multifaceted nature of spirituality in our global community.
The indigenous history and heritage of the Philippines. The Philippines, an archipelagic nation. The Philippines is a nation of islands blessed with a stunning natural landscape. Its geography, which includes mountains, rainforests, and coastlines, profoundly influenced the lives of its indigenous communities. The pre-colonial Philippines. The pre-colonial Philippines, or the pre-colonial period in the Philippines, extended for thousands of years, representing a time when indigenous cultures flourished in isolation prior to European contact. The cultural diversity of the Philippines was a mosaic of indigenous groups, each with its unique languages, customs, and way of life. The Tagalog, Visayan, Igorot, Lumad, and Mangyan, among others, coexisted, contributing to the nation's rich tapestry of culture. The cultural achievements of the Philippines. The pre-colonial Filipinos made significant cultural contributions. They developed the Baybayin script, an indigenous writing system that recorded their history and stories. Their craftsmanship was evident in the creation of intricate textiles, jewelry, and pottery reflecting their artistic and creative prowess. The social structures. Indigenous societies were often organized into chiefdoms or barangays, each led by a local leader or chieftain. These societies were marked by close-knit communities where strong family and clan bonds played a central role. The agriculture and environment. Sustainability was a hallmark of pre-colonial Philippines. Indigenous communities were skilled in agriculture, cultivating a variety of crops such as rice, sugarcane, and taro. They also excelled in boat building and relied on the abundant marine resources that surrounded their islands. Spirituality and beliefs. Indigenous belief systems were deeply rooted in animism, where nature was venerated. Rituals and ceremonies were central to their lives, often tied to agricultural cycles and the reverence of ancestral spirits. These belief systems fostered a deep connection with the environment. The colonial impact. In the 16th century, Spanish colonization brought profound changes to the Philippines. This period introduced Christianity and European customs, altering the spiritual and cultural landscape. The encomienda system was imposed, leading to forced labor and dispossession for indigenous communities.
Indigenous resistance and revolts. So, indigenous resistance and revolts in the Philippines have a long history dating back to the period of Spanish colonization in the 16th century. Indigenous people, often referred to as Lumad, in the Philippines have faced various forms of oppression, land dispossession, forced labor, and cultural suppression throughout its colonial and post-colonial history. As a result, they have frequently engaged in resistance movements and revolts to protect their rights and autonomy.
Resilience and syncretism. Despite the challenges of colonization, many aspects of indigenous culture endured through syncretism. Indigenous communities showcase remarkable resilience, adapting to the new circumstances and preserving their heritage. Elements of their traditional beliefs and practices blended with Spanish influences to create unique and enduring traditions. The contemporary indigenous issues. Today, indigenous communities in the Philippines still face challenges. Issues like land rights, cultural preservation, and social inequalities remain critical concerns. Advocacy for their rights and recognition for their contributions to the nation continue to be essential.
Here are some examples of indigenous resistance and revolts in the Philippines. First is the Goy Rebellion 1744 to 1829. One of the longest recorded revolts in the Philippine history. This rebellion was led by Francisco de Gojoy, a Bahulano, against Spanish authorities. It was sparked by a dispute over taxes and the treatment of his brother. The rebellion lasted for 85 years and is a testament to the determination of indigenous people to resist colonial rule. The second is Polaris Revolt in 1762 to 1765. Juan de la Cruz Palares, an indigenous leader, led this rebellion against Spanish colonial force in the Pangasinan region. The revolt was driven by grievances related to the forced labor and abuses by Spanish authorities. Philippine Revolution in 1896 to 1898. While this movement was primarily a struggle for Philippine independence from Spanish colonial rule, it also had the participation of indigenous leaders and communities in various regions. Katipunan, the revolutionary society that initiated that movement, aimed to unite Filipinos, including indigenous peoples, against Spanish oppression. The fourth is American period resistance. When the United States took control of the Philippines after the Spanish-American War in 1998, they faced resistance from various indigenous groups, including the Moro people in the Mindanao and the Cordillera region, Igorots. These groups fought against American colonial rule and attempts to impose American culture and governance. The fifth is Hukbalahap Rebellion in 1942 in 1954. Although not exclusively an indigenous movement, the Hukbalahap or Hawks included indigenous members in their ranks. This communist-led rebellion primarily sought to address issues of land reform and social justice, which were also concerns of indigenous communities. The last is current indigenous struggles. In contemporary times, indigenous people in the Philippines continue to face challenges related to the land rights, environmental protection, cultural preservation, and self-determination. Various organizations and movements, such as the Cordillera People Alliance and the Save Our School Network, work to advocate for indigenous rights and resist encroachments on their ancestral lands. These examples illustrate the resilience and determination of indigenous community in the Philippines to assert their rights and preserve their culture in the face of historical and ongoing challenges. It is important to note that indigenous resistance and revolts are just one aspect of the broader history of the Philippines and its struggle for self-determination and social justice.
Environmental stewardship and sustainability are closely related concepts that revolve around responsible and mindful action towards their environment to ensure their long-term health and well-being. Here's a more detailed explanation of each. So first is environmental stewardship. So what is environmental stewardship? It is refers to the responsible and ethical management of natural resources and ecosystems. It involves taking care of environment, protecting it from harm, and ensure that it can thrive for current and future generation. Here's the key principles. One is conservation. Conservation, protecting and preserving natural resources such as forests, water bodies, and wildlife to maintain their ecological balance and diversity. Next is sustainable use, utilizing natural resources in a way that meets current needs without depleting them for future generation. Restoration and rehabilitating ecosystems that have been damaged or degraded to their original healthy state. Next is education and awareness, raising public awareness and promoting responsible environment practice. Next is the meaning of sustainability. It is referred to the capacity of maintain or endure over the long term in the context of environment. It means meeting the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. Here are the key principles of sustainability. Is one is environmental, minimizing the negative impact of environment by reducing pollution, conserving resources, and promoting renewable energy sources. Second, economic, ensuring economic activities are viable and do not deplete resources or harm ecosystem in the long run. Next is social, promoting social equity and well-being by considering the needs and rights of all people, including those of future generation. Next is interconnectedness, recognizing the environmental, economic, and social aspects are interconnected and should be balanced to achieve true sustainability. So, together, environmental stewardship and stability aim to foster a sense of responsibility and accountability towards the environment. Environmental stewardship often serves as a practical approach to achieving sustainability goals, and it involves making conscious choices and taking actions that reduce environmental harm and promoting the well-being of both nature and social society, ultimately contributing to a more sustained future.
Good day, sir. Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about colonial impact and cultural assimilation. So, in the introduction, is the Philippines is home to numerous indigenous groups, collectively known as Lumad and Katotubo, each with its distinct languages, customs, and ways of life. These indigenous communities have lived in the Philippines for centuries, shaping their unique identities and heritage. However, the period of the colonialism had profound the lasting effects on their societies. So the arrival of Spanish colonizers in the Philippines is in 1565 marked the beginning of a centuries-long colonial rule. So the Spanish colonial administration sought to convert indigenous people to Christianity and imposed a system known as the Incomedia, where indigenous communities were forced to work for Spanish landowners. This resulted in the forced labor and displacement of indigenous peoples, disrupting their traditional ways of life. So, cultural assimilation was a central aspect of Spanish colonization. Indigenous language and customs were suppressed, and the Spanish language and Catholicism were imposed upon the indigenous populations. Many indigenous communities were forced to abandon their ancestral beliefs and adopt new religion practices, which had a profound impact on their cultural heritage. Now, here is the American colonial period. So, following the Spanish American, the United States acquired the Philippines from Spain. American colonialism brought significant changes to the archipelago, including the introduction of English as the medium of instruction in schools. While this facilitated communication and access to education, it further eroded indigenous languages and customs. Despite the extensive cultural assimilation efforts during colonial rule, many indigenous communities in the Philippines have managed to preserve their cultural heritage. They have maintained their languages, traditional rituals, and knowledge systems, often in the face of the adversity. In conclusion, the colonial impact on indigenous history and heritage in the Philippines was profound and often detrimental, resulting in the loss of languages, customs, and ancestral lands. However, indigenous communities in the Philippines have shown remarkable resilience and determination in preserving their unique identities and cultural heritage. So, efforts to recognize and protect indigenous rights and heritage are essential for ensuring and continued survival and flourishing of these diverse and vibrant cultures in the Philippines.
Ancestral domain land typically refers to the traditional lands, territories, and resources that indigenous or native communities have occupied, used, or relied upon for generations. This land often hold cultural, historical, and spiritual significance to these communities. The concept on ancestral domain is often used to discussion of indigenous rights and claims. Land tenure system rule invented by societies to regulate behavior. Rules to tenure define how property rights to land are to be located within societies. They define how access is guaranteed, right to use, control, and transfer land, as well as societal responsibilities and restraints. So, what is land tenure program system? So, services and operationalize either through land acquisition and distribution, what we call LAD, or leasehold operation. It involves the a distribution of government and private agricultural lands and landless farmers and farm workers. So the difference of ancestral domain and ancestral lands, according to the definition provided chapter 2 terms, domain comprise land, inland waters, coastal areas, and natural resources, terrain held under claim, ownership, occupied or possessed by ICCS by themselves or through their ancestors, communally or individual, since the immemorial.
Challenge in land dispute and exploitation. So, what is dispute and exploitation? Land dispute commonly occur due to a conflict claims, boundary dispute, further land titles, inheritance issue, or land grabbing. This dispute can become particularly complex when land titles overlap or when claimants possess different forms of evidence to justify their claims. Exploitation of natural resources refers to human beings' extraction, use of environmental aids. These resources include minerals, forest, water, soil, and air. Land dispute and exploitation often intersect and can be extravagate each other.
Land exploitation refers to the unsustainable or unfair use of land resources for economic gain, often at the expense of the environment, local communities, or indigenous people. Here are some challenges arise when land dispute and exploitation are intertwined. First, we have the environmental degradation. Exploitation land practices such as deforestation, illegal mining, and unsustainable agriculture can lead to environmental degradation, including soil erosion, loss of biodiversity, and pollution. Next, displacement of vulnerable communities. Land exploitation projects such as large-scale agriculture or mining operation often result in the displacement of the local communities, particularly indigenous people. Next, we have the indicate regular, regulatory framework. Weak or poorly enforced land and environmental regulations can allow exploitative practices to persist without accountability. This lack of foresight can make it difficult for affected parties to challenge the exploitation through legal means. Next, we have the conflict over resource extraction. Resource-rich land often attracts investment in attractive industries, leading to conflicts between corporate interests and local communities. Lastly, we have the lack of benefit sharing. Communities living on land subject to exploitation may not receive equitable benefits from the economic activity taking place in their vicinity. Indigenous ecological knowledge (IEK) refers to the collective knowledge, practices, and wisdom of indigenous and local communities regarding their interaction with the natural environment. This knowledge is acquired over generation through their experience, observation, and cultural practices. IEK encompasses a wide range of information about ecosystem, biodiversity, resources management, and sustainable living practices. Recognizing the value of indigenous ecological knowledge is important for biodiversity conservation, sustainable resource management, and addressing global environmental challenge. Collaborative efforts between indigenous communities, scientists, policymakers, and conservationists can help integrate ECK into broader strategy for environmental protection and sustainable development. Example of IEK is the rice terraces of the Cordilleras. The rice terraces of the Philippine Cordillera, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is a prime example of the indigenous ecological knowledge and sustainable land management practices. The ancient terraces were constructed by indigenous communities, particularly the Ifugao people, over 2,000 years ago in the northern part of the Philippines. The Ifugao rice terraces explicitly the intricate relationship between indigenous communities and their natural environment. Their indigenous ecological knowledge not only sustain their livelihoods but also contributes to the biodiversity conservation and resilience in the face of environmental challenges. These practices serve as a valuable example of sustainable land management and can offer lessons for modern agriculture and environmental conservation efforts worldwide.